I'm Emma Carter, 32 years old, living in a small but cozy apartment in Seattle, with windows that look out over a quiet street lined with tall evergreen trees. I work as a software engineer, a job I'm good at, a job that pays my bills on time, leaves me enough to buy good books and take occasional hikes on weekends. To anyone looking from the outside, it's a perfectly normal, respectable life. But in my family's eyes, it was never enough. Jake, my older brother by 3 years, was the complete opposite. He was tall, always dressed in sharp, expensive clothes, with a smile that could charm almost anyone. From the time we were children, he knew how to turn every conversation toward himself, telling grand stories, making big promises, carrying himself with a confidence that felt almost impossible to shake. While I spent my free time reading or learning how to write better code, Jake was busy making connections, talking about his big plans, and convincing everyone that he was destined for greatness. By the time he turned 28, he had launched his first company, Clear Data, which he later renamed Vantage Analytics. He rented a sleek office in downtown Seattle, bought a watch that cost more than my monthly rent, and told everyone he met that he would be a self-made millionaire before his 30th birthday. Every family gathering, birthdays, holidays, even casual Sunday dinners turned into a celebration of Jake's achievements. My dad would clap him hard on the back and say, "That's my boy, a born leader, knows how to dream big and make things happen." My mom would nod proudly, then turn to me with that soft, pitying smile that always made my chest feel tight and heavy. "Emma, you're clever. Of course," she'd say gently, "but you just don't have that spark. You're happy staying in your little world, but life is about reaching for something bigger, something that makes people look up to you." I won't pretend I was perfect. Far from it. I had flaws that I knew held me back. I was far too trusting. I always wanted to believe people meant well, even when my gut told me otherwise. I hated conflict more than anything. I would rather stay quiet and swallow my hurt than speak up and start an argument. And deep down, hidden beneath my quiet confidence in my work, there was a quiet insecurity sometimes. I would lie awake at night and wonder if they were right. Maybe I was too cautious, too ordinary, too afraid to take the kind of risks that led to real success. That insecurity made the Christmas dinner 2 years before the wedding feel even heavier. The whole family was there, aunts, uncles, cousins, my elderly grandparents, all crowded around the large wooden dining table in my parents' home. The air smelled of roasted turkey, cinnamon, and fresh pine from the tall Christmas tree in the corner, decorated with lights and ornaments we'd collected over the years. Jake had just finished giving a long speech about how his company was growing faster than ever, how he had just closed a major deal with a chain of regional businesses, how he planned to buy a large house by the lake the following spring and take the entire family on a luxury vacation to Europe. Everyone clapped and smiled, looking at him like he was some kind of hero, the pride and joy of the Carter family. Then Jake turned to me, raising his glass high so every eye in the room shifted toward us. "You know what's funny?" he said, his voice loud and sharp enough to cut through the noise of conversation. "Everyone keeps telling me how smart Emma is. Oh, Emma's so good with computers. Emma's so clever. She could do anything she sets her mind to. But if she's really that talented, why is she still renting a tiny apartment? Why does she drive that old sedan that barely starts on cold mornings? Why is she just working for someone else, following orders, while I'm building something real, something that creates jobs, helps hundreds of people, and makes our family name mean something? If she had real ambition, if she wasn't so afraid to step out of her comfort zone, she'd be successful too. But I guess some people are just happy being average, too scared to try for something better." A few people chuckled, thinking it was just a joke. My mom nodded gently, her expression earnest, as if she truly believed she was giving me good advice. "You just need to try harder. Emma, success doesn't come to those who hide away and wait for it." I sat there, my throat tightening until it felt like I could barely breathe, my face growing hot enough that I was sure everyone could see it, I wanted to speak up to tell them I'd worked late nights for years, that I'd saved carefully, that Jake's great ideas were often just words on paper, but I held back. That was my mistake, the one I'd made so many times before I hated fighting. I always hoped things would get better on their own, so I stayed quiet and let the words hang in the air. And it only got worse after that night. A few months later, I was up for a major promotion at work, the one I'd spent 3 years working toward, taking on extra projects, staying late to help colleagues, and earning the respect of my team. It would have meant a significant raise, more responsibility, and the chance to lead projects I truly cared about. But a week before the final decision was made, my manager called me into his office. He looked uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes, as he told me there were serious concerns about my professional reputation. Someone had called the company, claiming to be a close family member, and told them I was difficult to work with, held grudges, was too slow to make decisions, and couldn't be trusted with important client projects. I didn't get the promotion. Not long after that, rumors began to spread around the office that I was unreliable, that I caused unnecessary problems, that I had a bad attitude toward authority. Colleagues who had once been friendly began to keep their distance, unsure what to believe. Eventually, my manager called me in again and said it would be best if I moved on to another company where I could start fresh. I was let go. For months, I struggled just to get by. I used almost all my savings to pay rent and bills, bought only the cheapest groceries from discount stores, and took small, low-paying freelance jobs just to keep the lights on and food in the fridge. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I'd lose my apartment entirely, if I'd ever be able to build a stable career again. But through it all, I kept one thing safe: a small, black external hard drive stored in a locked drawer in my desk. On it, I had saved every file, every email, every note and timestamp from years before. I never thought I'd need it, but I kept it anyway just in case, because no one in my family knew the truth about what had happened 8 years earlier. When Jake's big dream almost crashed and burned completely, and I was the only one who could save him. It was late October, 8 years before that Christmas dinner. Rain poured down hard against the windows of my small apartment, and the wind howled through the trees outside, rattling the branches against the glass. I had just finished a simple dinner of soup and bread and was sitting at my desk, working on a personal project to practice my coding skills, when there was a sharp, urgent knock at the door, loud and insistent, like someone was desperate to get in. I stood up, walked over, and opened the door to find Jake standing there. He looked nothing like the confident, successful businessman he pretended to be. He was soaked to the bone, his expensive wool suit wrinkled and stained with rainwater, his hair messy and dripping onto the floor, his face pale and lined with exhaustion and fear. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Emma," he said, his voice rough and shaky, barely louder than the sound of the rain. "Can I come in? Please?" I stepped aside without saying anything, and he walked in, leaving a trail of water drops across my wooden floor. I closed the door behind him and led him to the small dining table. He didn't waste any time on small talk or pleasantries. He got straight to the point, his voice tight with worry. "Clear data is falling apart," he said bluntly, staring down at the table. "The developers I hired, they were terrible. I paid them a fortune, promised them big bonuses if they delivered on time, and they said they could build exactly what I described. Something fast, something reliable, something that would make businesses want to pay good money for it. But what they gave me is garbage. It crashes constantly, loses important data. It's so slow, it's almost unusable. And it's full of errors that would make any serious company run the other way. My investors are furious. They've seen it. They know it doesn't work. And they're threatening to pull all their funding by the end of the month. If they do, I lose everything: the office, the money I've put in, the reputation I've spent years building. I'll be ruined before I even really get started." He leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table, his eyes wide and desperate as he looked at me. I have the idea. I know exactly what businesses need, what problems they're facing, what would make them buy this product. I have the business plan, the connections, the vision, everything except something that actually works. I can't hire new people and start over in time. It would take months, and I don't have months. You're the only one who can do this. Please just build something that works well enough to show them, something that proves the idea is good. Buy me some time, and I'll pay you double what you make at your job. And once it takes off, once we get more funding and start making real money, everyone will know you helped. I promise you that. I'll put your name in the official documents, mention you in every interview, give you credit whenever I talk about how it all started, whatever you want. We're family, right? We look out for each other when things get tough. I hesitated. I knew exactly how he talked about me behind my back, like I was good at doing small, technical tasks, but didn't have the creativity or the vision to really contribute to something important. I knew he cared more about how things looked to other people than how they actually worked. But I was too trusting. I wanted to believe he meant what he said, that he would be grateful, that family truly meant something. That was my weakness. Fine, I said, looking him directly in the eye so he would understand I meant every word. But I have two conditions. First, you give me full public credit. You tell everyone exactly what I did. No hiding it. Second, you pay me the full amount you promised. No excuses, no delays. That's non-negotiable. I'm not doing all this work just so you can take all the praise. Of course, he said quickly, reaching across the table to take my hand and squeeze it firmly. I swear it. Once we succeed, everyone will know the truth. We're a team. Okay. For the next 6 weeks, I worked almost non-stop. I'd leave my day job at 5 o'clock, stop at the grocery store on the way home to grab something quick and cheap to eat, and then sit at my desk until 2 or 3 in the morning, working without stopping. I designed every part carefully, testing everything over and over again to make sure it worked properly, fixing every possible mistake, making sure it was simple enough for anyone to use, but strong enough to keep important information safe. I wrote down every step I took, every choice I made, just as I always did, a habit I'd learned early on, so I could remember exactly how things worked if I ever needed to come back to them later. When I was finally finished, I had a complete working system. It wasn't some fancy, overcomplicated thing that promised to do everything under the sun. It was simple, solid, and did exactly what it was supposed to do. It was exactly what Jake needed to show his investors that his idea could actually work. Jake came over a few days later. He sat down, tried it out, testing every feature, and his face lit up with relief and excitement. "This is perfect," he said, grinning from ear to ear like a child who'd just gotten exactly what he wanted. "It works just like I imagined. You saved me. Emma, I don't know what I would have done without you." He pulled out a check from his wallet and handed it to me. But when I looked at the amount written on it, I saw it was for less than half of what he'd promised. When I mentioned it, he waved his hand dismissively, like it was something that didn't really matter. "Money's really tight right now," he said, his tone already changing to something more casual and distant. "We've spent so much already, and we don't have the new funding yet. Once we get that money, I'll make it up to you. I promise. Just be patient for a little while." And I did. That was my mistake. I wanted to trust him. I wanted to believe that family meant something. So I took the check and let him leave with the files I'd spent weeks creating. 3 months later, everything changed. I was sitting at my kitchen table one Saturday morning, drinking coffee and reading the business section of the local newspaper. When I saw it, there was a large photo of Jake, smiling confidently in a sharp new suit, and a bold headline that read, "Brilliant local entrepreneur creates revolutionary data system Clear Data, set to transform how businesses operate." The article went on and on about how Jake had spent years developing the idea, how he'd worked day and night to build it from the ground up, how his unique vision and hard work had created something no one had ever seen before. It talked about how investors were already excited, how the company was expected to grow quickly, how it would create jobs and help businesses all over the region. There was no mention of me anywhere. No thanks. No credit. Not even a single line saying he'd had help from anyone. It was as if I'd never existed at all. I felt my chest get tight. My hands start to shake slightly as I read the words over and over again. I picked up my phone and called him. When he answered, I could tell he was busy, surrounded by people in what sounded like an office. "Jake," I said, trying to keep my voice steady even though I could feel my anger rising. "I just read the article in the paper. Where's my name? You promised everyone would know I helped build this." There was a short pause, and then he laughed a sharp, cold sound that made my skin prickle. "Come on, Emma, let's be realistic here. What you did was just technical work. Anyone who knows how to use a computer could have done it. The idea, that's what matters. That's what people pay for. That's what makes a company successful. And I paid you for your time, didn't I? So we're even. You got what you agreed to." "That's not fair," I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. "Without the work I did, you would have lost everything. Your idea was just words on paper until I turned it into something real. You wouldn't have a company at all without me." "Look," he said, his tone turning hard and impatient, like he was talking to someone who didn't understand how the world worked. "You did a job. I paid you. That's how business works. This is my company now. If you want to be recognized, come up with your own big idea instead of just helping other people with theirs. Stop being so jealous and bitter about it." Then he hung up the phone. I was furious, hurt, and completely shocked. I went to my parents' house that evening and told them exactly what had happened, how Jake had come to me desperate for help, how he'd promised me credit and fair pay, how he'd lied and taken all the praise for himself. But instead of being angry with Jake, they looked at me like I was the one in the wrong. "Jake has a vision," my dad said, shaking his head slowly and looking at me with disappointment. "He's trying to build something big, something that will help a lot of people and make our family proud. You're just being jealous because you don't have what it takes to do something like that yourself. Don't try to tear him down just because you're not as successful as he is." My mom nodded, her expression sad and disappointed. "Maybe you should be happy for him instead of making trouble. It's not nice to try to take credit for something that's not yours. You're his sister, you should want him to do well." That was when I realized just how deep the lie went. Jake started telling everyone, our relatives, his friends, his business partners, even people he barely knew, that I was bitter and jealous, that I'd tried to steal his idea after he'd generously let me help him with some simple tasks. He said I was angry because I didn't have the skills or the drive to build something of my own, so I wanted to ruin his success. And slowly, people started believing him. But I never forgot. And I made sure to keep copies of everything, every file, every email, every note I'd written, every date and timestamp, all saved securely on that small external hard drive, stored in a safe place where no one could find it. I never planned to use it unless I had to, but I kept it, just in case. 5 years later, a thick, heavy envelope arrived in the mail. It was made of high-quality, cream-colored paper, embossed with gold lettering, and felt expensive even before I opened it. It was an invitation to Jake's wedding. The card said he was marrying Sarah Bennett, the daughter of Robert Bennett, one of the most well-known and respected venture capitalists in the entire country. Robert Bennett had made his fortune over decades by investing in companies that were solid, honest, and had real potential, not just flashy ideas that sounded good but didn't work. If he decided to invest in Jake's company, which had recently changed its name from Clear Data to Vantage Analytics, it would be the biggest break Jake had ever gotten. It would give him more money, more connections, and more respect than he'd ever had before. It would make him practically untouchable in the business world. For my parents, this wedding was the ultimate proof that Jake had truly made it. They talked about it constantly for months. telling everyone they knew about the powerful, wealthy family Jake was joining. They bought new clothes, planned what they would say, and acted as if this was the greatest event our family had ever been part of. "Think of the doors this will open for him," my dad would say, grinning from ear to ear whenever the subject came up. "He'll have connections everywhere. He'll be able to do anything he wants, build anything he dreams of. And Sarah is such a lovely girl," my mom would add, smiling warmly. "And her father, well, he knows a winner when he sees one. It just proves what we've always said Jake was born to lead. He's going to go so far, and we'll all be proud to say he's our son." I received my invitation along with a short handwritten note from my mom. "Please try to dress nicely, dear. There will be a lot of important people there, and we want to make a good impression. And try not to talk too much about computers or work." Okay, most people don't find it very interesting. I sighed and set the note aside. I didn't want to go. I knew exactly how the evening would go. Jake would be the center of attention. Everyone would praise him and tell him how lucky he was. And sooner or later, he'd make that old joke about me being the family failure, just to make himself look better and get a laugh. But I was family, and I knew that not showing up would only cause more drama and give Jake more reason to talk about me behind my back. I bought a simple navy blue dress, nothing too fancy, but nice enough for a formal event, and a pair of low, comfortable heels. I did my hair and makeup neatly, the way I usually did for important work events. I packed my small purse, my phone, my wallet, a little lipstick, and that old external hard drive I'd carried around for years, just out of habit, just in case. The wedding was held at the Pebble Beach Resort in California, overlooking the Pacific Ocean. It was grand, expensive, and formal, exactly the kind of event Jake loved. The ceremony was beautiful, with white flowers everywhere and soft music playing. And then everyone moved to the huge ballroom for the reception. There were over 300 guests, CEOs, investors, lawyers, politicians, famous people, everyone who was anyone in the business and tech world. Everyone was dressed in their finest clothes, and there was a constant hum of conversation, laughter, and business being discussed over drinks and dinner. I stood near the edge of the room, holding a glass of sparkling water, feeling a little out of place. I watched as Jake moved through the crowd, shaking hands, laughing loudly, telling stories, looking every bit the successful, important businessman he wanted everyone to believe he was. Beside him was Sarah, beautiful, warm, and clearly very much in love with him. Eventually, Jake spotted me standing alone. He walked over with Sarah and a small group of her family and friends following behind him. "Everyone, this is my sister Emma," he said, his voice loud and clear enough for everyone standing nearby to hear. A big grin on his face. The family failure. Spends all her time alone in front of her computer. Never goes anywhere. Never does anything interesting. Right, Em. A few people chuckled politely, not sure if he was being serious or just joking. Sarah looked slightly uncomfortable, shifting her weight and glancing at me with a little sympathy, but she didn't say anything. My mom, who had been standing nearby, stepped over and patted my arm gently. "She's happy in her own little world," she said, like it was an explanation for why I wasn't like Jake. "She just doesn't care much for big events or meeting new people." I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the heat rising in my cheeks. I wanted to leave, to walk out and go back to my quiet hotel room. But I stayed. I forced a small, polite smile and said, "I'm fine, thank you." Before Jake could say anything else, a man stepped forward from the group. He was in his 60s, tall and distinguished, with neatly combed silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to notice everything around him. It was Robert Bennett, Sarah's father, the man whose investment could make or break Jake's company. "Jake," he said, his voice deep and steady, "I see you've introduced your sister, Mr. Bennett," Jake said immediately, his tone changing completely, becoming more respectful, more careful, like he was suddenly trying very hard to impress the older man. Yes, sir. This is Emma. As I was saying, she's the quiet one in the family. Mr. Bennett looked at me, his gaze lingering on my face longer than necessary. He tilted his head slightly, as if trying to place something he'd heard before. Wait a moment, he said slowly, his expression curious. Emma Carter. The small group around us fell completely silent. Jake blinked, looking confused. Yes, that's her name. Why, Mr.? Bennett ignored him. He took a small step closer to me, his expression one of genuine interest. Are you the developer who created the system called Atlas? For a second, I couldn't speak. I was completely taken aback. Atlas was known in small, practical circles, people who actually used tools like that to run their businesses, but it was far from famous. It didn't make headlines. It didn't make anyone rich. And I never expected someone as well known as Robert Bennett to have even heard of it, let alone know my name. I nodded carefully. Yes, that's me. To people who worked in technology, Atlas had a quiet, solid reputation. It wasn't flashy. It didn't promise to change the world, but it was reliable, easy to use, and secure exactly what people wanted when they were trusting a system with their most important information. Robert Bennett didn't invest money based on what someone told him. He had a whole team of experts who checked every single part of a company before he decided to put money into it. They looked at the business plan, the team, the market, the competition, and most importantly, the actual product. A few months before the wedding, his team had been researching data management systems, and they'd come across Atlas. They'd tested it thoroughly and had been impressed by how well it was built, how simple it was, and how carefully it was designed. But until that moment, they'd never connected it to Jake's quiet, unassuming sister. Our team tested several systems last quarter, Bennett said, keeping his eyes on me. They said Atlas was one of the most practical, well-designed tools they reviewed. It does exactly what it claims to do. No more, no less. I didn't realize the creator would be standing here today. Jake laughed nervously, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, trying to brush it off as something unimportant. Oh, that's just a little hobby project Emma works on in her spare time. Nothing compared to what we've built at Vantage Analytics. Ours is much larger, much more advanced, designed for big companies and growing businesses. Bennett turned his attention fully to Jake, and his expression changed, still calm, but now sharp and direct. Actually, that brings me to something I've been wanting to discuss. Before we commit to investing $50 million into your company, we do a very thorough review. We look at everything: the history of the company, the people involved, the market, and most importantly, where the technology came from. And our team noticed something interesting. He paused for a moment, letting the words sink in, making sure everyone around could hear him clearly. They said the core structure of your system, the way it works, the way it's organized, is very similar to the first version you launched 8 years ago, back when it was called Clear Data. And that same design shares many unique features with Atlas, features that are not common in other products on the market. Jake's smile faltered, his eyes widening slightly. He forced another laugh, but it sounded hollow and forced. Well, all data systems work in similar ways. There are standard methods everyone uses. Is it? Bennett asked gently, but his tone left no room for evasion. Our engineers tell us those particular design choices are not standard at all. When we asked where the original Clear Data code came from, your team told us that all the old records and documentation from that time were lost or no longer available. You told me directly that you built it all yourself, from the very beginning. That's right, Jake said quickly, his voice rising just a little higher than usual. I had the idea. I oversaw every step. I worked with people to turn my vision into reality. That's how building a business works. You have the idea, and you put together the right people to make it happen. People. Bennett raised an eyebrow slightly, his gaze steady and unwavering. Then perhaps you can explain it to me. Walk me through the early development. What problems did you have to solve? Why did you choose that particular way of organizing information instead of the more common methods that most developers use? Jake opened his mouth, then hesitated. He started talking about market strategy and understanding what clients need, but he couldn't answer the actual questions. He couldn't explain why certain choices had been made, how the system handled different situations, or what technical challenges he'd had to overcome. It was obvious to everyone listening that he didn't truly understand the system he claimed to have created. Bennett looked back at me, his expression kind but serious. You helped him back then, didn't you? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This was the moment I'd kept that hard drive for, even if I'd never really wanted it to happen. Yes, I said, my voice clear and calm so everyone could hear. 8 years ago, the developers Jake hired produced a system that didn't work at all. It crashed constantly, lost data, and was completely unusable. He came to me desperate, begging me to build it from scratch. He promised he would give me full credit publicly and pay me fairly for my work. But once he had what he needed to impress his investors, he took all the praise for himself. Later, when I refused to stay quiet about it, he spread false rumors that ruined my reputation and cost me my job. I reached into my purse and pulled out the small external hard drive I'd carried for years. I held it up so everyone could see it. Everything is here, I said. Every file I created, every email we exchanged, every note and timestamp showing exactly when the work was done. It proves exactly what I did, what we agreed, and what happened after. The full truth. I handed the drive to Bennett. He took it carefully, looked at it for a moment, then passed it to his assistant, whispering instructions to have it examined by independent experts, people who had no connection to either side, so the results would be fair and accurate. Jake's face turned bright red with a mix of anger and embarrassment. He stepped forward, raising his voice so more people from nearby tables started to look over. This is ridiculous. She's just making this up because she's jealous. She's never been happy with her own life, so she wants to ruin mine. Don't listen to her. She's just bitter. But no one laughed anymore. The room had gone quiet, and everyone was watching him closely, the doubt clear in their eyes. The wedding continued, the speeches, the music, the dancing, but the mood had shifted completely. Wherever Jake went, whispers followed. People looked at him differently, with curiosity and doubt instead of admiration. Even his friends and business acquaintances seemed unsure what to say or do. Robert Bennett didn't make any big, dramatic announcements right there in the middle of the reception. He simply told everyone that he would look into the matter properly, carefully, and let the facts speak for themselves. 2 weeks later, Bennett's team began their full investigation. They compared files, cross-checked dates, and spoke to people who had been around when Clear Data first launched. It took a full month of careful work to verify every detail, to make sure there was no mistake. Then the official statement was released. Robert Bennett's office published it publicly. After a complete and independent investigation, we have confirmed that the core technology of Vantage Analytics was originally developed entirely by Emma Carter. Jacob Carter misrepresented its origin, claiming sole credit for work he did not perform. There is also evidence that false and damaging information was deliberately spread to harm Ms. Carter's professional reputation. As a result, we are formally withdrawing our proposed investment and ending all business discussions. And that was only the beginning. The story spread slowly but surely through business circles, then to financial news websites, and eventually to local and national newspapers. Reporters started calling, asking questions, looking for more details. Other investors who had been considering putting money into Jake's company began to do their own checking. One by one, they started to pull out their support, stating that they could not work with a company built on dishonesty. Jake tried to fight it. He gave interviews to local newspapers and business blogs, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, that he'd hired a consultant just like any other business owner does, that there was nothing wrong with getting help to build a product. He said I was lying, that I was bitter and wanted attention. that I was trying to ruin his success out of jealousy. But the proof was there, clear, detailed, and impossible to ignore. The dates matched, the work matched, and over time, more people who had been around in the early days came forward to say they'd heard Jake admit that he didn't really understand how the system worked himself. His chief technology officer resigned a few weeks later. He released a short, honest message to the company and the public. Without complete and accurate records of how the system was originally designed and developed, it has become too difficult to maintain it properly, update it, or ensure it remains secure for our clients. I cannot in good conscience continue to lead the technical direction of a product whose true history is not fully and openly known. Major clients started canceling their contracts one after another. They didn't want to risk using something that might have legal problems in the future, or something that might not be properly maintained or secure. Some of them even chose to switch to Atlas, because they knew exactly where it came from and who had built it, and they could trust that it was honest and reliable. For nearly a full year, Jake fought as hard as he could to save his company. He sold his expensive car, his designer watch, his large house by the lake, and moved into a small, modest apartment. He tried to hire new developers to rebuild the system from scratch, but his reputation was already too damaged. No one wanted to work with someone known for lying about his work and mistreating others. He tried to change the subject, to talk about new ideas and future plans, but people had lost their trust in him. Finally, 11 months after the wedding, it was over. Jake filed for bankruptcy. Vantage Analytics was closed down completely, its remaining assets sold off to pay back as much debt as possible. His marriage didn't last long after that. Sarah tried to make it work, but the pressure, the loss of trust, the way her family felt about the situation, it was too much. They separated shortly after the bankruptcy was finalized and divorced a few months later. It was quiet and private, but it was final. For my family, it was a painful but necessary lesson. For years, they had chosen to believe the story that made them feel proud and important, rather than the messy, complicated truth. Slowly, as the facts became clear and there was no way to deny them, they began to realize how wrong they had been. They apologized not right away, but when they were ready, sincerely and from the heart. They said they were sorry for believing Jake's stories, for not listening to me when I tried to tell them what had happened, for making me feel like I wasn't good enough for so many years. I told them I understood, that it was easy to believe what you want to believe, but that it would take time to fully heal. Robert Bennett reached out to me several times after the news came out. He offered significant funding, resources, and support to expand Atlas into something larger, something that could help even more businesses. But I turned it down politely. I liked my life exactly as it was, quiet, simple, and honest, without the pressure and public attention that came with running a large company. I was happy working at my small job, helping people, and having something that was truly mine. I'd learned that I didn't need fame or wealth to be happy, something I'd always struggled to believe, even after all these years. But I also made one thing very clear: Jake could not simply walk away from everything he had done, as if nothing had happened. He had lied. He had taken credit for work that wasn't his, and he had deliberately tried to destroy my career and my reputation. There had to be a price, a clear acknowledgement of what he had done. A few weeks later, after months of silence, Jake contacted me through a lawyer. He was working small, low-paying freelance jobs, struggling just to pay his rent and bills, and he knew his reputation in the business world was damaged beyond repair. "I don't want your money," I told him when we finally spoke, "and I don't want to see you homeless or suffering. But you owe me, and you owe everyone who trusted you. You will publish a full, public statement acknowledging the complete truth that I built the original Clear data system, that you lied about creating it yourself, that you failed to give me credit or pay me what you promised, and that you deliberately spread false rumors to damage my career. You will also transfer all remaining legal rights related to that original work to me. So there is no confusion about who created it, now or in the future. That is the only way to make things right. Jake hesitated, clearly not happy about it, but he knew he had no other choice. If he refused, the truth would remain in the public eye, and he would never be able to work in the industry again. A week later, he published the full statement on his personal website and shared it with every business contact and news outlet he had ever worked with. It was honest, detailed, and clear, no excuses, no attempts to minimize what he had done. He never became wealthy or famous again. He worked as a humble freelance consultant, helping small businesses with simple, honest work, trying to rebuild his reputation slowly and carefully over time. We were not close, and we would never be as we might have been if things had been different. But there was no longer anger or bitterness between us, only the quiet truth. Finally, out in the open, last Thanksgiving, our whole family gathered again. Jake was there, quiet and respectful, no longer wearing expensive suits or telling exaggerated stories about his success. No one called me the failure anymore. No one looked at him like he was better than everyone else. We sat around the table, eating simple food, talking about ordinary things: work, the weather, books we'd read, places we wanted to visit without lies or pretense. I thought back over those 10 long years, the jokes, the pain, the way everyone had chosen to believe the more exciting story instead of asking for the truth. I thought about my own mistakes, being too trusting, staying quiet when I should have spoken up, letting their words make me doubt myself. But I also knew I'd done the right thing in the end. For 10 years, my family called me the failure. In the end, the only thing that failed was the lie they had built around my brother. Atlas is still used today, quiet, reliable, and trusted by people all over the world. It doesn't make headlines, and it doesn't make me rich. But it is mine, honest, solid, something I built with my own hands, and something no one can ever take away from me. And that was more than enough.